We have the pleasure of welcoming Carson Heady to our interview series today. I am Nishita Goyal from the Engati team. Let's begin with a quick introduction of Engati. Engati is the world's leading multilingual no-code chatbot platform available across 14 channels, about 25,000 bots created across 186 countries in every domain and use case. We at Engati run the blog and the video channel, which receives an attraction of more than 300,000 visitors annually and publish around 2 interviews with well-known names globally every month. And now, moving on to our guest. Carson Heady is the author of the best-selling book Birth of a Salesman series and is consistently ranked in top 20 sales gurus in the world. He is also ranked in the top 50 sales authors on LinkedIn and ranks number one in various senior leadership and sales roles across 4 companies, including Microsoft and AT&T. He is also recognized for starting and leading $50 plus million annual operations. Hey, Carson, it's thrilled to have you on the channel today.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Pleasure being here.
That's great. So I'll just begin with my first question. I do see that you believe in a philosophy about holy sales trinity. It would be great if you can explain more on that.
Yeah, certainly. I appreciate the question. The holy sales trinity for me, it was something that I came up with several years ago when I was spending a lot of time doing sales training and writing and coaching and leadership. And really, it's what it said. The heart of it is that there are 3 parts to every sales transaction, sales relationship, and it's the customer, your company, and you. And those 3 entities have to benefit from everything that you do. And I think that's it's a good template to remember and to keep in mind. And I say that because there's a lot of times that you will see deals that are being put together where one of those pieces is missing. You think too much about yourself and the customer suffers and your company suffers. Or you try solely to do something that's right by your company and neither you or the customer really benefits from that. Or if you go all out and take too big of a margin or a hit on putting together a deal that the customer really loves, it could hurt your company and it can hurt your brand. So really at the heart of the sales trinity is those are the 3 entities that have to be taken into consideration and have to benefit from everything that you do. And if one of them isn't, it's a red flag. So try to keep those 3 wholly owned entities at the heart of everything that you're putting together.
Okay, that's great. So you mean to say that a win-win situation for both the customers and the company is the ideal situation to actually make the customer feel, okay, that's where we both win and not that one of them is at stake out there.
Absolutely. I think it's important. That's why it's so vital to understand your customers, why it's so vital to understand what their needs are, whether they know them or not, helping them identify what gaps may exist, how your solution may benefit them, how you might personally be able to benefit them. There's a lot of times where it isn't necessarily my solution that's benefited the customer. It's been more about how could I help them with an introduction? How could my network help them? How could my knowledge or even my responsiveness be of benefit? So it's a very customer-centric approach, but you also have to understand that you're an ambassador of your own brand. I mean, you work for a company that pays you to be an evangelist of that brand, and so they also have to be a part of it. But certainly, you also want to understand how you are compensated, what's going to be advantageous for you when you put together a deal, but also, what's going to be advantageous for you longer term with that customer and with that company. So I think that they're all very connected. It's kind of a food chain, if you will. There's very symbiotic relationships all around.
That's true. Okay, so I'll move on to the next question. How do you see conversational agents or AI and automation playing the role of an aid to an organization's salespeople?
That's a great question. This is something that is happening more and more. And since I work for Microsoft, I mean, I get the opportunity to see a lot of these types of things on both sides of the spectrum. So I see customers today that are, where it's becoming more and more prominent. They have a bot as a front end to quickly engage with customers and route their needs appropriately. So uploading an FAQ and allowing a customer to engage with that bot, even in light of this pandemic. I work with customers that have implemented bots that have been able to really address questions and also route needs appropriately if they need immediate attention or if they just need a question answered. So it obviously alleviates the customer service team and the selling teams of a lot of these these organizations. But at the same time, it can get questions answered in real time, which is of immense value and customer satisfaction implications with these customers. The other thing I see a lot of too, I loved the fact that you called out the AI and automation part of that. Something I see a lot of too is from a selling perspective, scoring leads and also presenting recommended action based on a customer's interaction with marketing material or other purchases that they've made or other account history that they've had. That to me is fascinating, and it changes the game from a selling perspective immensely when you're able to have these levels of insights. Because it can help inform your actions. It all comes down to probability. It all comes down to probability of that lead being a warm lead, being responsive, being able to move quickly with agility. Is it in an industry where there is a lot of movement? So AI can take all of these things into consideration and can give some very guided recommendations on how we can make decisions. I think we're seeing that in the real world right now, just how valuable data is to countries making decisions on how it's affecting, real world scenarios. But data is going to be very paramount. It's not only paramount now, but it will only become more so as we continue.
Yeah, that's correct. But do you think maybe an automated bot, or let's say an automated bot affects the decision of a buyer in some way, because the buyers still are tradition and they want like a human figure to be present and they want that human touch to be while they're making or they're purchasing something?
It can, for sure. I do think that it's a very delicate decision because you have to keep, again, the customer at the heart of what you're doing. And so I think respectfully, if you do implement a bot, you definitely want to think about how quickly something can be escalated to a human being, and also under what circumstances you want to have it escalated to a human being. So you want to give them the opportunity, if it requires immediate human touch, that they have that capability, because if they do not, that will conceivably lead to a negative scenario. But on the flip side of that, because the bot can often be immediately available and a human may not be able to, I think there are certainly situations where it can augment that experience. So yes, keep the customer at the center of your thought process there. Yes, absolutely provide a path for escalation to a human being. And then also think about your customer subset and how exactly you want to structure that, their ability to very quickly get through to a human, and under what circumstances.
So I think the baseline is customer centricity is the key to success. If you want to make a win sale or like a complete satisfactory sale, you need to see what customers are actually satisfied or actually looking for.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, I'll move on to my next question. And I think this is one thing which all salespeople face as an issue. So how do you actually solve the problem of getting quality leads in a B2B sales cycle? And is the practice of getting data sources and cold calling dead, or do you think it's still being used by some businesses?
Yeah, the problem is solved by differentiation of your portfolio. I mean, it's just like stock investments. It's very easy for one well to dry up. I mean, so if you stop getting leads from marketing or you stop getting leads from inbound, that could certainly cause a problem if you're solely reliant on those sources for your leads. However, I've typically trained my teams to employ a variety of methods. Sure, I get leads from marketing and I get leads from inbound from time to time. But personally, I'd prefer to create and nurture a lot of the relationships myself, thanks to the ability to use social media and tools like LinkedIn, which Microsoft now owns. I have the ability to prospect, and I've been very successful in finding people by geography, by title, by organization, being able to find these folks, connect with them, and then create relationships that matter. I don't think anything will ever replace the face-to-face, or in this day and age, at least the virtual call like we're having today. But at the time, those are tools that make it very easy now, or relatively, to connect. With that comes a lot of responsibility, because I think you have to use it effectively and use it right. You also have to be consistent in your approach. So I think that's how you solve the problem of quality leads. But at the same time, you want to look at, the cold calling question. It's not dead. It just looks very different than it used to. It's not the same as, pulling out a directory and starting to call folks. It can be, and frankly, sometimes, because fewer people are doing it, sometimes you can still reach out to people via the phone and get a hold of them. It really just depends on your customer target. However, I think that cold calling looks different, because now, with the ability to connect with folks virtually and via social media, via LinkedIn, you can find nearly everyone. It's what you do with that counts. And so the cold outreach isn't really all that cold. When I can research someone, I can see if we share an alma mater. We went to the same school, we enjoy the same sports, we enjoy the same activities, we're part of the same groups. I can see their affiliations, I can see publications that they've made. So I go in as a much more informed seller. And I think that's where cold calling has shifted, is it's not as cold. And it's not necessarily picking up the phone. It can be, but again, like we just talked about, it's like differentiating your portfolio. You don't want to employ just one method to get a hold of these people. You want to find different methods. So it could involve the phone call. It could involve the warm referral, somebody that that knows this person, and you get an introduction. It could involve going out on LinkedIn and trying to connect with this person. Frankly, I've had more success going after connecting with 30 people if I want to connect with one. And what I mean by that is casting a very wide net in an organization, because you never know who's going to be receptive. And it's all about probability and odds of how you are going to, one, find a person where your message will resonate, and two, find somebody who's going to be receptive at that time. I mean, there's planets that have to align sometimes. So cold calling, there's a lot of value. It just doesn't look the way that it looked 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago.
Yeah, right. I couldn't agree more, and especially with the fact that you need to have a personalization present in the way you're conveying or talking to a lead right now, because nobody wants to be, they need that personalization factor, because that's how you might differentiate your sale while your competitors are trying to poach them too.
So true. I think that it's all about meeting customers where they want to be met. And, in the days of sales where we, pulled doors and walked into their offices versus picked up the phone and tried to call to get the decision maker on the line, that's changed dramatically. And there's a lot of ways to use very relatively passive approaches to get their attention. The ability to connect with somebody on a social media platform is one thing. It's very passive. There's no commitment required on their part. So it's very easy for them to accept your request. On the flip side, you also have the ability to share content that they are now privy to. So if you're sharing content thoughtfully and they're able to see and engage with that content and make a decision on their own terms, we've all seen the marketing statistics. Customers have to see something 5 to 10 times for it to resonate, for them to, have that instilled and make a decision. They also do a lot more research now than ever before actually making a buy. So I think that's why it's so important that we understand the power, between having a virtual connection, being able to share some of these materials, and then also being very consistent in our approach. I invite a lot of folks to engage in very informative sessions. I put together events and webinars a lot of times with different vendors that we work with, and I try to find different ways to engage that aren't necessarily forcing them to make a decision or a commitment, but allow them to come up at their own pace. And frankly, if I do an event or a webinar that's done effectively across a lot of different leads, I will get some conversations. And that's really what it's all about. So, I challenge salespeople to be mindful of where their customers want to be met, the best ways to reach out to them, and sometimes taking a less aggressive approach in that making the information available, letting them come, and the folks that want to come to you have that dialogue and then nurture that relationship. That is the best way to not only find new leads, and solve the B2B leads problem, but also enabling you to nurture really strong relationships and become a trusted advisor.
That's so true. So yeah, you have to nurture the lead well before actually pitching them your product, and that actually helps you win half of the sale out there. I think that's a good advice for all the salespeople out there.
Thank you.
So I'll move on to the next question. What are your thoughts on inbound versus outbound marketing? And how do you think social media plays a role in marketing out there?
That one's near and dear to my heart. I've spent a lot of time in both inbound and outbound divisions in my career. I think that there's a lot of value in both. It's another one of those where, I always try to see the value that each one of them brings. So like, for instance, an inbound channel and being able to drive people to engage from an inbound perspective allows the inbound folks to a lot of times vet the opportunity and bring in the right people. So there's a lot of power in that. You have someone who is interested and you are working to capitalize on that warmer relationship that you've created. So there's a lot of value there. As far as outbound marketing, it's more of a crapshoot. There is a lot lower probability of success in certain cases, but there it's all about crafting the message. It's all about trying to figure out what is the net that I want to cast. Do I want to cast a very wide net with people that are going to be enticed by my message? And then from there, the more people I get in, even knowing that they may not all be warm leads, but do I want to cast a very wide net so that I can at least engage and get a dialogue? Or do I want to cast a very small net, and in which case you get very few leads back per se, but they are probably higher probability to get engaged. So I see value in both immensely, just because I've seen how they've worked over multiple organizations that I've worked in the past. So I think there's a place for both. I think where I challenge both sides is from an inbound perspective, making sure that your mechanisms to receive the leads and to act on those leads, be actionable and be responsive are strong. And I say that because the issue that I've seen there is when we are not equipped to take in that lead and we are not responsive. A lot of times people are shopping your organization. And if you don't respond very quickly, if you don't respond that day or within 24 hours, they will go elsewhere. We are in an immediate gratification society. And a lot of times when people are looking for information, they expect results and answers. So my challenge to inbound marketing would be ensure that you have a mechanism in place to capture that lead and to act. From an outbound marketing perspective, think about it's all about probabilities. And, I talk about that a lot in selling because that's really what it comes down to. You always want to look for the things that are going to increase your probability of getting to the next step in that sales cycle or in that relationship. So think about what you're actually trying to do. You're not trying to get them necessarily to make a purchase right out of the gate. Sometimes we're just trying to sell a meeting. Sometimes with outbound marketing, we may be trying to sell an event or a webinar. So we want to make it as enticing as possible. I think that's why a lot of times you see promotions or giveaways or things like that will get people to come in, which is great because then you're able to engage. You can give them some swag. You make them feel good. You give them a message. You develop a relationship. Those types of things are very important. I think my challenge to outbound marketing is always look for ways that will attract, build a community around what you're doing. I worked in an environment a few years back where it was a brand new role, and it was we kind of had carte blanche to put together a platform the way we wanted to do it. And there were some existing leads. There were some folks that had come in from marketing, but what I feel like we did differently than anybody else is we really built a community around what we were doing. We made a newsletter. We did targeted outreach. We created events. We created webinars. Anytime that there was some kind of promotion or product announcement, our first line of attack was, let's get the message out. Let's be communicative. Let's be responsive. And that's why we won. That team was globally recognized as a top team for many quarters in a row. And there's no reason why geographically, our team would have been better than any other. But it was because of that philosophy. So for outbound marketing, I really challenge you to think about how can you build a community around what you're doing? How can you be very communicative and informative and be present? And if you were able to do that with quality touches of your customer base or potential customer base, I think you'll be successful because you've enhanced your probability of success.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully explained, because I think most of the people who actually start their career in sales are always hesitant towards outbound marketing, because it's more of scary. Okay, what if the customer just hangs the call up and they don't listen to me? I don't know if that's the right target audience am I targeting, or they're already using a solution. How do I actually get them to my solution? So I think, they have to be more creative in a way. And that's what I concluded from that it's more of an approach that you actually take it towards moving it to them, and rather just following like a basic script or saying, okay, I have to ask this 5 questions and get it through.
Yeah, I mean, scripts are good for trying to follow a process, but you want to add the human element to that script. That's why it's so important. You want to add your own flair. The reason scripts exist is to keep people on task and keep people following a process. The process is important, but you want to find your own personalized way of doing that process. So I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, but process is all about people. You have to follow the process with the right set of people. So yeah,
that's it.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. As I said earlier, also you're the author of the best-selling series titled "Birth of a Salesman." What advice in your book do you wish you would have received while you were starting your career?
There's a lot, but I think the two things is be humble and persevere. There's a lot that you can do as a salesperson when you have a personality, when you have work ethic and things of that nature. But over a long period of time, the things that are the most important are to be humble, be a team player, and persevere, because you're going to go through a lot of challenges. In my career, I've been very blessed, very fortunate. I've had some success at some big companies, some small companies. I've met a lot of amazing people and talked to people all over the world. Case in point, this conversation right here. And but I've had a lot of struggles too. I've had I've been laid off. I've had big challenges. I've been turned down for promotions. So there's a lot of different things that transpire. And through all of that, you have to look at what's the unique value that you can bring. And I think that's where a lot of us don't necessarily challenge ourselves early on. We come into the workforce, we're trying to make a paycheck. And for me, frankly, I never even intended to get into sales. I started in what I thought was going to be more of a customer service type role. I turned into a sales role. And I happened to be good at it because I had the gift for gab. And, I've been able to transform that into a sales career that I'm very proud of. But I've had more success in my later years in my career because I've become a better team player. I've thought more about how can I help my colleagues and my peers. I've thought more about how can I focus more on the relationship with the customer? How can I be a better advocate for my customer? And again, we were just talking about that. I mean, it's all about keeping people at the heart of your process. I was probably much more process oriented when I was younger, and now I'm much more people oriented. So I think when it comes to what I wish I would have known starting out, focus on people, focus on relationships, be humble, persevere through challenges. The people that are successful are the ones that are left standing when everything's said and done. It's that simple. There's been a lot of times in my career where I was like, can I keep going? Should I stay in this job? And I did, and I was rewarded for it. So I think that no matter where you are in your career, if you're starting out, if you're midway through, or even if you're at the end, it's take it, slow it down, take it one moment, one task, one responsibility at a time, and really be mindful of the things that matter most, which is, at the end of the day, your customer, your company, and your agreement with them, and your well-being. What is the best move for yourself? And you're going to be faced with a lot of decisions. There is definitely a value in making strategic risks. I've made some dumb risks in my career, but it's all part of the journey, and it all makes you more valuable and more experienced in what you do. So if I were to sum it up, that would be it.
Okay, that's wonderful. So if you have to say like a particular list of qualities that you think a salesperson should have, so what I understood from your description would be have to be a team player, great at communication. But what do you feel about persistence? According to me, what I've seen right now, it's important to be a salesperson to be persistent enough to actually chase your client, or even try to, like as you said, customer service tech role also. You need to make sure that you're chasing them, or you're trying to help them to make them successful. Because even when you're not trying to sell it to them, or just trying to help them out by providing like a solution, you're halfway there. The customer is impressed, and you're like, okay, why don't I go with you? Because you have a better support than anybody else is offering to me.
There is a line, and I'm not going to be able to quote it verbatim, but there is a line in the book "Think and Grow Rich" by Napoleon Hill, and it basically says that people who have been successful or found success always found it after the point where most people would have given up. And so, when it comes to persistence with customers, with customer relationships, with really anything. Just ask my wife. It really all comes to not giving up and continuing to, in my mind, make quality touches. We were talking earlier about the value of making quality touches and building a community around what you're doing. And I think doing that type of a platform, it makes it a lot easier to be persistent, but not be a pest. And what I mean by that is you can set up a mechanism where you're making quality touches, you're sending information about your product. And just because a customer doesn't respond, it doesn't mean that they don't see it. It doesn't mean that they're not thinking about it. I had a group that I worked with years ago, and overall, it was not a good experience, but I learned one thing out of it. I always try to take something out of every scenario in my life, even if it was a bad one. And this one was stay top of mind. Always look for ways to stay top of mind. And so that's what I do. I post a lot to social media. I write a lot. Some would probably say I post too much. They see me all the time. But it's funny because when I run into those people, I'm always like, but you see my name a lot, don't you? You thought of me, didn't you? And that's really what it's all about. I would rather over communicate than under communicate. And I think that's where customers value communication. Sometimes that's been the only value that I've been able to bring. I've worked in a lot of different industries. It would be impossible for me to master every single one of them. But what I can do is be responsive. What I can do is communicate. What I can do is find ways to engage. And so, yes, I could not agree more. Persistence is vital because at the heart of persistence is continuing to try to reach out to these folks. And that outreach doesn't always have to look the same. I think that's the mistake that we make sometimes, is that we may send them an email and then we just keep checking in or following up. That's not going to go anywhere necessarily. What we've got to do is, it could be, hey, maybe we talked to this person 6 months ago and I saw an article online that reminded me of the conversation that we had. And so I take 5 seconds of my time and I send them that article and say, hey, I saw this and I thought of our dialogue. What are your thoughts on this? stuff like that that stays top of mind, but that also shows that you're paying attention. It could also be maybe you see something that's going on in their industry, or you see that they are going through some kind of merger and acquisition situation. Anything that you can utilize to try to start a conversation. Remember, you're not trying to sell anything. You're trying to sell a conversation. You just want to have a dialogue. And especially if it's a customer that you haven't talked to or haven't talked to in a long time, you're not going to sell them anything right out of the gate. But what you can do is try to get a conversation. So trying to find those unique little ways to send them things, send them a newsletter, invite them to events, but then also sending them maybe an article that resonated with you that you think might resonate with them. Those types of things work. So stay top of mind and just be relevant.
Yeah. I think the most important thing what you said is communication is the key. So it's okay it's not okay to under communicate, but you have to over communicate because you need to make them that, okay, I am present for you if you ever need me out there.
Exactly.
I think that's really important. Okay, so moving on to the next question. CRM now has become a legacy. Where do you see technology to support the customer channel actually evolving out there?
It's all about data and insights now. What I see is interconnected platforms that provide real-time results, real-time insights, and evolving mechanisms that allow us to connect and track the customer journey. CRM systems, I mean, we own one, right, at Microsoft. So, it's the systems themselves. I don't see them going away, but I see them challenging themselves to add more value, to have more connection points, more plugins. I see them interacting with other platforms in different ways. I mean, those are the types of conversations that I am privy to very often these days from a CRM platform perspective is how can this plug in with my email? How can this plug in with my LinkedIn? How can this plug in with maybe my other data sources, so that the data can feed and the data can provide insights. And really, that's at the heart of it is data. Every customer is figuring out, and some are farther ahead than others, obviously, but every customer is figuring out how do we leverage the data we have, how do we better leverage it, and then also how do we get more? How do we find data that's relevant so that we can have insights that are going to be impactful? When I think about where technology is going to go to support the customer channel, I see it becoming more personal. I see it becoming more connected. I see it becoming more data-centric. I see it being more focused on adding value for the customer. I love the fact that when I go into a CRM tool and it's immediately connected with my email so that I can see, for instance, if I'm going into a meeting, it could be connected to my calendar. That calendar could immediately show me the LinkedIn profiles of all of the other folks that are in that meeting. Those are the types of things that are very helpful to a seller because it saves immense amounts of time. So I believe that the technology is only going to improve, but also improve the seller's experience and the customer's experience because we are going to be more armed and we are going to be more empowered to have knowledge. And that's really what it's all about. I do think that with that comes the responsibility of, you always see the cream rise to the top. Who is going to be the person that is able to really take all of that information and data at their disposal and make better decisions, make better outreach and moves. So it's very interesting because I've been in sales for 20 years. So watching the sales arena evolve dramatically from a technology standpoint has been fascinating to me, but it's also exciting because it's only going to get better. And if we keep the customer at the heart of that, the technology is only going to make it a better relationship.
That's correct. I think that's well said out there. Okay, so I think I'll move on to the last question. Are there any other sound bites or any advice that you want to leave our viewers with, and especially to people who are looking to build like a career in sales?
Yeah, I mean, We talked about this a little bit earlier, but the biggest advice I ever give is it's all about people and process. I think a lot of times people get very hung up on results, but if you have the right people that are following the right process, you will be successful. It's that simple. Now, don't get me wrong, you'll encounter challenges, and sometimes the people will change. You also have to address your people relationships and keep those at the heart. And by that, I mean customers, and I also mean people that you work with, colleagues, your team, your leadership. But at the heart of that is also the process, and the process has to be customer centric, like we talked about. It also has to evolve. Look at the times that we're in right now. We've never had to evolve more in my entire career than right now, because this isn't a time where you're aggressively trying to sell a product. Your product might be obsolete right now. So it's important to remember that you are your best product. The unique value that you as a seller can bring, the knowledge you have, the communication that you have, the relationships that you can build, that's the real value. If you're a good salesperson, you're going to find a home anywhere because you will be able to, there will always be a demand for what you do if you do it well. But I would say keep people and process at the heart of everything that you do. Advocate for people. I feel like, and I want to make sure that people understand that success comes from understanding how you can best use the tools and resources that you have at for your customers' benefit and advantage, and empowering them to do that. It really has nothing to do with selling them a product or service. It's all about making sure that they understand what's at their disposal and that you can help them find it. I've worked in some big companies, and for me, a lot of times it may not even rest with me. I need to introduce this customer to this person who can help them, and knowing the stories. We're in a storytelling time as well. Being able to tell customers, hey, this is another customer that had a very similar situation. This is what they did. This is who they worked with. These were the results. And again, there's a lot of that's going to continue to focus around data. So I would say advocate for people, and evolve your process with people at the center. Your process will change, though you need to be consistent in your execution of process. You will evolve it from time to time, but if you're consistent about both of those things, advocating for people and following your process, you'll be successful. And it's really that simple. And have fun. I think sales for me has been the greatest thing about sales for me has been the relationships that I've made. I still have such fond memories of people and workplaces that I worked in years ago because it was all about the people. It was the fun times that we had, and that shared experience. You're going to spend more time at work, unfortunately, sometimes unfortunately, than you will at home. So I think it's important to embrace the things that can add a lot of value for you and that can enrich you, but have fun while you're doing it too.
That's great. It was a pleasure talking to you, Carson, and thanks for spending some time and helping us understand and look at the world at a different way. So I think it was personally an enriching learning experience for me, and I hope my viewers actually gain something from this as well. Thank you so much, and I hope you stay safe and stay positive out there.
Thank you. You too. I loved it. Thanks for the opportunity.